Rossi's paranormal thriller, Harvey, takes place in and around the fictitious Virginia town that shares the novel's namesake. And though the town was a product of Rossi's imagination, several of Harvey's locations were inspired by real life, a select few having counterparts in the living world. One of these locations is White's Ferry, located outside of Leesburg, Virginia.
I'd known about White's Ferry for about as long as I've been living in this area, but it was several years before I actually made it part of my commute. And since that time, it's become pretty routine for me to take the ferry anytime I go into Maryland. I wrote a good portion of Harvey waiting for the ferry to come pick me up and shoot me across the river, so it only made sense that the ferry be part of the book.
White's Ferry, also known as the General Jubilee Early, has been doing business since as far back as 1828 and is the only ferry still in operation on the Potomac River, carrying cars, bicycles, and pedestrians between Virginia and Maryland.
You know, I still remember the first time I saw the ferry coming in out of the fog in this big spectral ghost ship built out of metal piping with a chugging diesel engine and these headlights just floating in at me from out of the murk. You know, it left quite an impression, and I knew then the role that White's Ferry would serve in the book. And even though it only appears in a single scene, it's a vivid and pretty intense scene, and it did spawn one of the tunes off the soundtrack, Once in a River.
The book's protagonist, Calvin Hubbard, exiles himself to the backwoods town of Harvey, Virginia, to compose the album that will save his rock and roll career. Rossi wrote the music and lyrics that make up Calvin Hubbard's album while writing and editing the book itself.
Well, I actually wrote Once in a River while on the ferry. You know, I remember that day I had forgotten my notebook, so I was writing the lyrics out on a bunch of scraps of receipts. There's no shortage of paper in my car. My car is always a mess. But so I'm writing on these receipts, and I've got the stereo blasting. I'm listening to John Hardy, song by the Gun Club, and it's just this intense rock and roll tune, fast and dark. And I think a lot of that comes through in Once in a River. But it was funny because I was in my own world, and the ferry hands come up the boat to take your tickets, and I had my windows up, and the guys, my air conditioning's cranking, the music's loud. I'm this maniac scribbling on these little bits of paper, and meanwhile the ferry hand is pounding on the window to take my ticket. So they probably think I'm crazy because I'm always writing or doing something on that boat. But yeah, so that's Once in a River, written on the ferry.
For more information on Phil Rossi's novel Harvey, visit harveythenovel.com.